Great. Hey, thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so excited to be here with Startup Boston Week. Startup Boston Week is a great organization. I think got my first introduction with them when I first joined MassChallenge about a year ago, funny enough. So this morning we have three speakers. Introduce myself a little bit before I let Oriana, Paris, and Keith go on with their little intro and bios. But before we start, I would love if people in this chat could tell us where they are in their entrepreneurial journey. Are you guys still a student? Are you guys looking for a job right now or thinking about starting your own company? Because this is essentially a session about thinking about what to think about before starting a company. So we're kind of curious to see where everyone's in their entrepreneurial journey. So if you don't mind, you should definitely share that in the chat. I know it's a little early in the morning, but also plug your LinkedIn. So we're kind of curious to see where everyone's at. But on my own end, I'm Jason. I work for the program team, especially for the early stage startups at MassChallenge. We're a nonprofit accelerator headquartered in Boston. But we have global outreach. On my team, I pretty much focus on helping a lot of early stage startups and facilitating a lot of programs. So a little bit of what we do right now, as well as kind of designing the curriculum and thinking about how we can connect mentors and investors to our community. Oriana, would you like to give a little quick bio?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Oriana, and currently I'm the CEO and co-founder of AOA Diagnostics, and we're focused on developing the first blood test to diagnose ovarian cancer. I have a career primarily in women's health, focused on bringing to market diagnostics. I've worked at two previous women's health startups from the very early days, all the way through their exits, both Boston-based companies. I've worked with their acquiring companies, so large life sciences companies, also focused on really how do you drive adoption and increase access to products in women's health? This is my first time as a founder. I had the idea with my co-founders for AOA in 2019. We officially incorporated in 2020, right as the pandemic was kicking off. And in 2021, we raised $7 million in our seed funding. And now we've been essentially building product and hoping to go out for our Series A soon. So I know quite a bit about what it took to start from the early days to what it takes now to build. And I'm happy to share that with the co-panelists today.
Woohoo! Thank you, Oriana, for introducing yourself. Paris and Keith, who wants to take next?
All you, Paris.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Paris Chandler. I'm founder and CEO of Black Tech Pipeline, a job board and recruiting platform centering Black technologists all over the world. And I'm also starting a new company called Dark Mode Beauty, which is a tech beauty brand. It's not launched yet. We're still in our very, very early days. So I know what it's like to start a company that the idea sort of falls into your lap, and then another that I'm building from the ground up in a space that I'm not so familiar with.
Great. Thank you, Paris. And finally, Keith, would you love to give a little spiel about yourself as well?
Sure. So I'm Keith Cline. I'm the founder of VentureFizz. We're an employment branding and recruitment website focused on the tech industry. So if anybody's looking for a job opportunity, whether if you're an engineer, product manager, sales, marketing, any job function, VentureFizz has lots of opportunities there. But the landscape of how companies engage with an audience is different now. So there's a lot of content that is created on VentureFizz that helps tell the story of the company, their people, and their culture. So there's a lot of research that people do on VentureFizz to discover that not only is it a good job description, but a great place to work. So, prior to starting VentureFizz, I was a headhunter. So I ran my own search firm for 15 years. And obviously I'll get into more of the weeds of the story and the journey of how VentureFizz, started out as a side project and became what I do full time.
Actually, on that note, I'm kind of curious, Keith, since you're already talking about this, the transition between the side hustle to a full-time job. I'm kind of curious, when you first started out, what were some of the things you considered, like what are the top three items you considered when you were thinking about, okay, this should stop being a side hustle to more terms of real-time jobs? What were some critical points when you were thinking about this? I know this is a tough question to start off with, but you got me going with that.
Yeah, so it was a long transition. So I think it's important to kind of give some timestamps of when these all occurred. So I started a search firm. I was working in a recruiting firm for 4 years, went off on my own. We were a boutique firm of 3 people. We were doing VP of products, CMO searches for startups in Boston and New York. So I was deep in the weeds of the tech industry, knew a lot of venture capitalists, knew a lot about founders, knew a lot of people in the industry that were, former candidates. So that was 2001, 2002 timeframe. I always just paid attention to venture capital deal announcements, and it wasn't as common as you find it today. Like you can get lots of newsletters, Crunchbase. There's a whole slew of resources now. But back in 2006, when I kind of was just tracking this data on my own, I was just publishing this on a blog. Like it was a free blog from Google. It was a blogger platform. And I was just posting all the funding announcements that I would discover. And it really wasn't any editorial behind it. It was just purely copy and paste. And then all of a sudden people started following that. And I'm like, okay, it was more of a hobby for me. And then the market crashed in 2009 due to the financial crisis. And I had no searches to do. So I was like, I always had this idea of this site that kind of was a community website that had the deals that I was already doing, jobs, which parlayed to what I did professionally. All the VCs were blogging at the time, so pulling in all their blogging activity, and then a networking calendar. So it was a very community-driven website at first. So since I didn't have search work, I focused on building VentureFizz and built like an MVP, and was fortunate to get some coverage like Scott Kirshner, who I know is still very involved in the Boston tech scene. I think he's been moderating a couple of events this week at Boston Startup Week. He wrote about it, and that helped me kind of get to the next level as far as getting started. So from that point, going back to my timestamp, is that was 2009. So I was still doing the search work through 2016. So it was like 7 years of running this side business to when I actually did go full time. Now it's been 6 years since I've been full time, but to answer your question, the key metrics was, does this product matter, right? Did I have user adoption and were people using it? Yes. Was it something that I felt like I could do full time, that I was super passionate about, that ended up being perfect timing for me, because after running a search firm for 15 years, you're always running to your next search. And I was just exhausted from doing that. And I needed a change of pace, but it was still leveraging the domain experience that I had built. And then third, it had revenue. So it was allowed me to separate from the search work fees I was generating to doing something that was more subscription based. That's a recurring revenue stream. So it was a different business model, but obviously a good transition. So those were the three key things that mattered for me.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense. Honestly, I love when you all those were pretty great too, but I got really caught up on the idea and the context in which VentureFizz was created, especially in the highlight of the recession. Because funny enough, MassChallenge also came around that time, right around the recession.
It totally did. I remember going to the first MassChallenge meeting where they were just talking, evangelizing John Hawthorne, and I was just like, "You guys are crazy. This is never gonna work." And obviously, they absolutely crushed it.
But on that context, that's why I love that we have a diversity of people on our speakers list, because Oriana has founded a company, but this was much more recent, I think, in the last 3-4 years. So I'm kind of curious. I understand where Keith is coming in with the mindset of VentureFizz and this highlight of the session, thinking about how jobs are sourced and how we're thinking of the startup space. But I'm thinking, Oriana, I'm kind of curious. 2019 is a very different ecosystem than 2009. What made you become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So my co-founders and I have been working together for the last decade. I mentioned that I'd been a part of 2 previous women's health startups. I was in those startups with them. We were early stage employees always. We'd been part of the journey. We'd never been founders before. And in 2018, the last company that we were a part of exited. And so we went on either to work at the acquiring company or to take another essentially stable job in the life sciences space. And we came together and said, we'd really like to find another technology in women's health. I think that for us was the drawing force. Is we're passionate about women's health. There's a lot of underinvestment in the space, and we knew that we had an expertise, and we wanted to apply that to really have an impact. And so we said, okay, we know that we really want to do something in this space, but none of us are scientists. So we were not in a position where we could essentially develop a technology. So we all had to stay full time, similarly to Keith, until there was a certain inflection point where it would make sense for us to go full time. And first we had to find a product, very similar to Keith's story, different domain, but it's like, do you have something that people want? And so we had to really go on the hunt. We were all working full-time jobs, incredibly busy, paying rent. And we went on the hunt to like academics, conferences, patents to figure out where was the research happening that we could draw from and partner with to actually end up building a company from. So that was the first point, which we ended up finding in late 2019, early 2020. And then the second area was, okay, is there a business model that can be made to this, very similar to Keith, is the revenue. For life sciences company, it's not like is there revenue today, but is there potential to revenue in X number of years when this product is developed, and how does it get there? But our business plan really includes like what's the regulatory path, what's the reimbursement path, what's the path to revenue, because that's what's going to allow us to get investment. And then the third element for us was that, okay, were we able to seek the funds necessary to build the company? And so because there was 3 co-founders, we actually staggered the time that for us to all go full time, because 3 people full time, that's a lot of overhead, that's a lot of salary for a very early stage company that's pre-revenue and pre-funding. Even we started with non-dilutive funding and grants. So as the CEO, I went in first, and this is primarily to really build out the company and to be able to start networking so that we could get investors. And so I was in a position where I could say, okay, I will go full time when I get funding from investors. But the reality in my case is that it was going to take me a lot more time, and it was going to be a lot slower if I waited for that traction from investors. And I knew that from investors, commitment from a founder, showing that at least one founder was full time and showing that commitment, like that's the risk that I'm taking into the business, was going to go a long way. So before we were raising money, when I knew that I was in a place that I had essentially enough savings to hold me over until when I thought we were going to get our first checks come in, I decided to take that leap of faith. And then my second co-founder followed about 4 months after, and then the third co-founder followed about 3 months after that. So the strategy we used was to stagger it so that there wasn't as much pressure on the company to really pay everybody's salaries from the get-go, but to still show that we were committed to the business, that we were really all in, and they continued to work part-time while we all went full-time. And then since then we've grown the team.
Yeah, I actually really love that the idea of staggering it and being showing able to, the commitment. I think that's a lot of VCs tend to love that. But I really want to follow up on that point of the leap of faith, that commitment idea. I think that's one of the most pressing questions I think a lot of people have before they started thinking of like starting a company. Like, how do you make that leap? How do you justify like, hey, is this like the fear that we have of what if this doesn't work out? How do you even quantify it? How do you measure this? How do you know you're ready? Like that's kind of like, I mean, everyone has their own individual journey. And I'm sure Paris has a much different perspective than you might have before. But I do want to follow up with you because you mentioned the leap of faith in particular. Like, what was this kind of pivotal? Like this is it. Like I'm gonna get over my fear. I'm good for it. What made you feel that way? Like,
I think it's very different for every individual. I can even tell you it's very different for the 3 of us as co-founders. For me, that moment came where I was working my day job and I was being paid. I've had a career in sales, and historically sales and life sciences, you can get paid really well. So I was being paid really well. I had a really cushy job. But I was not interested in doing that job. I was waiting for my lunch break to come so that I continue working on AOA. I was getting home and I was just wanting to work on AOA. On the weekends, I was just wanting to work on AOA. It was just like, I just want to do this. I don't want to do this other job anymore, even though I'm being paid really well. And I fully well knew that like for at least 6 months, I was not going to have a salary. So I needed to like stomach that element and be like, okay, thankfully I had a very supportive partner, because I think one of the things people don't talk about when you're starting a company is how do entrepreneurs have health insurance. It's like, it blows my mind. Like, we should do a panel on that. But like for me, it's true. It's like, so one of my partners was like, what am I going to do? I don't have health insurance, right? And like, that's a scary thing. It's such a mess. And so I had the fortune of having a partner that I could have health insurance friends. I was like, okay, that doesn't seem risky to me. I'm okay with that. And then I was like, okay, from a financial perspective, like, can I afford rent? What needs to kind of like change in my lifestyle? And then is it worth it for me? Like, I'm somebody that travels a lot. And I was like, I don't care if I miss out on a few trips. I want to build AOA. There was truly this desire that I was so excited to work on it that it no longer made sense to be behind a desk and getting a paycheck for something that I was so excited to do. And I think the last element is that I knew the risky part, which I would say is like the part of being unfunded and not getting any salary, was going to be short-lived, because I had faith in the business. I had a clear plan. I was like, this is when we're going to start our fundraise. This is roughly how long it's going to take. This is the worst case scenario, which means this is the worst case number of months that I'm going to be without a salary. And so there was an end point to the risky part. And I kind of focused on that. and kind of the drive that I just wanted to be doing this and I didn't want to be working for somebody else. And that's kind of what helped me get over the risk. That said, of all of my co-founders, I have the highest tolerance for risk. So I will say that, right? Like it very much varies with other with people, and that you kind of if especially if you're a team, you have to balance that. I think that's very good. If all three of us were incredibly risky, the company would not be successful. We need that person to kind of balance us out and and help you understand, is that the right move?
Oh wow, that's a really interesting story. I love hearing about that journey and then how you process that risk and how your internal feelings like, okay, the gut feeling is so important, right? At the end of the day, I think that's a lot of founders and VCs would say. It's like that you need to have some of that gut instinct, and that's definitely developed over expertise. But curious enough, I really want to hear at least from Paris as well. This one, Paris, definitely last but not least. But I definitely want to hear a little more about your entrepreneur journey, because I think this gives us a really good foundation for at least people in the audience to understand how everyone has come about. We've heard Oriana and Keith give a little more and peel a little more from their onion, but I definitely want to hear Paris. I know you come from engineering, more software engineering type of background. How did you end up making the Black Tech Pipeline?
Yeah, so Black Tech Pipeline came about because of a tweet that I posted that went viral back in 2018. So I posted, so when I entered tech in 2017. And when I entered, that's when I really started noticing that I'm sort of like the only Black person in this space. No matter like which company I worked at or any events I went to, there were only like just a few Black people, or I was the only one. So I was like, like this is strange for me, because I never came from those sort of environments before until I entered the industry. And so I got onto Twitter in 2018 just to talk about sort of like my journey in the industry. And that's where I discovered, oh wow, there are Black people in tech. They're just like either not in the Boston area, or they're online. And so I posted a tweet asking, what does Black Twitter, because Black Twitter is its own thing, what does Black Twitter in tech look like? And that tweet ended up going viral. And then Black technologists from all over the world posted themselves into that tweet. So it created a really long thread. And it was like, they posted their pictures and like captioned it with what they do in the industry. And then basically overnight, it formed this community called Black Tech Twitter, which is, it's a hashtag. It's a hashtag movement and community. And so when that tweet was going viral, Scott Kirchner, and then like just other people within the tech industry, employers, even some celebrities were like, wow, like this is really cool. Like there are all these Black technologists, and I don't know, people started discovering like there isn't really a pipeline problem. It's really a network problem. And so employers were reaching out to me from that day forward, asking if I could recruit these technologists into their companies. And I wasn't a recruiter. I didn't have recruiting experience. I was a software engineer. But I figured that recruiting couldn't be that difficult. So I just said yes. And so I started recruiting people from this new formed community into different companies. And I did that for free for almost 2 years. But the reason why yeah.
Wow, I was right. I'm like, wow.
That's impressive.
That's tough.
Yeah. I didn't
so you were doing your full-time job as an engineer, but doing this as a side helping. That's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you. My intention wasn't to start a company or anything. I was like, yeah, let's get more Black people in tech. That would be great if I could have a Black coworker. And so what happened was later on during me recruiting, but also being a software engineer, a lot of recruits came back to me and they let me know that they left the companies that I recruited them into. And so when I asked why, they were like, these companies were really performative. They weren't really setting me up for success. Like these companies could not retain the hires that they were getting. And so I felt horrible because I didn't vet these companies at all. I didn't ask them what their intentions were. I was just like, yeah, here's like talent. And so I was like, okay, like if I'm going to do this work, I have to do this right. And so I was like, I need to have a vetting process. I have to be able to check in on these hires while they're there. And that's when I was like, okay, this is like a company. And so that's when I decided that I need to launch a company called Black Tech Pipeline. And so our whole differentiator is that with our recruitment platform, we stay on the job with every hire for 90 days to make sure that, they're getting the support that they need, that they're having a good experience and things like that. And then we also have the job board. And so through building Black Tech Pipeline, I think I went through 2 or 3 different companies. I think I was at my 3rd company when I officially launched Black Tech Pipeline. And in this 3rd company, I was already a remote worker, and I was actually doing software engineering and recruitment of technologists. And so I was already gaining that experience to be a real recruiter. And so in June of 2020, I announced in a newsletter, I was like, hey, I'm launching Black Tech Pipeline. You know, if you're interested in learning more, here's my Calendly. And so I didn't expect my calendar to be completely booked all the way through October when I launched that. And I was like, wait a second, like I also have a full-time job. Like, I don't know how I'm gonna have meetings and like do this. But luckily I was remote, so it worked out. But I had so many employers interested in joining the job board or doing recruitment. And so I was getting paid before I launched. And I was like, okay, there's an idea, like people want this, it's gonna work. And so from June to September, I was having meetings. I had my clients, I had my job board and my recruitment. And then I launched the company in September, and I left my full-time job in October. And then I've been full-time with Black Tech Pipeline ever since. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow, that's quite the journey. There's a lot of follow-up questions I really want to ask, but one of the most like pressing things, like I think you talk about a lot of the dedication, the grit, the willingness to do scouting as well as a full-time job. I mean, there's a lot of notable traits, and every entrepreneur is going to say a different thing about this. But what do you feel like in your last 2 or 3 years has been like this most important factor, if not for yourself or within your team? Like, what has been the most important factor in your company's development and growth? Like, what has, like, I'm hearing a lot of different personal factors that might lead, like, that could lead to dedication. But a lot of people work hard. Like, that's a lot of people do. But I'm very curious, do you think there's anything significant, or there's like this one important thing, or if you can name a couple, maybe, like, that really made this development grow? I heard the tweet, I heard the grit, I heard a lot of things.
Definitely being engaged with my community members and remembering why I'm doing this work. Like, there's a lot of different companies, like they have a lot of different goals and targets and things like that. For me, I'm very much in like the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion space. And so I have to remember why I'm doing this work. So if a company comes to me that when I vet them, I can tell they're not really interested in changing. They're more so like, we need Black people. I have to be like, I don't care how much you're willing to pay me. No, like turning clients away if they're just not a good fit. And then also, I think that's like number one. And also remembering I'm in a space where I can't be like competitive. So I would never turn away, or I would never not mention another company that sort of does the same work as me in terms of like helping Black and brown talent get into tech. I wouldn't ever be like, don't use them, use Black Tech Pipeline. Just because like, you can't have competition in a space where there's already like not enough of us. You want to be able to like sort of share the wealth, get more people into the door. That's the whole point of this. So not looking at it as a competition, but that's like specifically for my company in the space that I'm in, not so much every other company. I know it's different.
This is a very interesting tie into my. I just have another thing on top of my head. I'm really focused on DI work, at least in my own capacity, in personal and professional. But before we go into that, I'm very curious. I want Keith to actually answer this question probably afterwards. But because you've been talking about the different diversity in terms of socioeconomic backgrounds, I think like when you're doing the startup journey alone, and people come from various different types of socioeconomic backgrounds, some who have more connection to resources than others. I think one thing what really comes to my head is, how do you recommend first-time founders with little experience in the industry or a network of any sort to find people to support the missions, whether this would be finding an engineer to help you craft something, or finding an investor or partner, or just like a mentor figure? Paris, if you want to take this question first, I would love to hear your thoughts. But Keith, I also have something following up for you too, so get ready.
No, Keith could answer.
Keith, all right.
So, so how do you get started? Is that the gist as far as?
I guess like, how do you recommend first-time founders with like who don't really have exposure to the industry? We're thinking about the students. If there's students in the audience that just graduated, like they're not very well connected as much. Maybe they do have the innovation networks within their universities, but some of us don't work in the tech space to begin with. You don't have tech parents. How do you make that first introduction? Who do you even talk to? Like,
okay, so if you're a student, you should definitely talk to your professors. Like pretty much every school has an entrepreneurial center somehow, some way. So if you're at any Boston school or any school. There's usually some professor that's part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So leverage that person. Second, leverage your alumni network, because there's entrepreneurs that have gone off from your school to build companies. And if you reach out to them on LinkedIn, it's very rare that that person's going to say, no, I'm not going to help you. Like, I mean, maybe there are some, but very few, especially if you're at the same school. And then third, you got to get out there like this. If you're attending this is step one, because this is learning and networking. And the more that you can attend these events. So on the online version right now, you don't have a chance to meet the audience as much, but you can certainly reach out to all the panelists on LinkedIn and connect with us and ask us our advice. Or if you're going to in-person events, it can be intimidating, but work the room. And the best way, if you are a little bit shy, is to be one of the first people that arrive. Because if you arrive early, that means there's only like a couple people that are all looking at each other and you're just going to strike up a conversation. So that kind of breaks the ice. And then you start rolling in terms of conversations with other people, and then go up and introduce yourself to all the panelists. If there's investors there, if there's former entrepreneurs or current entrepreneurs. So you just want to build your network. And you never know what roads are going to lead you down a path. So VentureFizz, the engineering side, I'm not an engineer. It's built on Drupal. My first child, my wife was attending a mom's group. All the families got together for a gathering. I was just talking to the other dads, and one was a Drupal developer. Just random, right? And that person has been developing our site for 10, 12 years, whatever it's been now. So you never know what conversation, where it's going to lead. Who knows somebody else? And just ask for help. Network as much as you can. And people will genuinely try to help you if you're, being, if you're asking for it. So don't be shy to ask.
Oh, solid advice. Paris, is there anything you'd like to add to that? That was thing Keith covered a lot too.
Yeah. Keith said like the networking thing, very important. And even if like you like networking online, I always tell everyone to please get on Twitter. Like Twitter it's hilarious, but then there's also like a lot of benefit to being on Twitter. Lots of opportunities come through Twitter. You can follow topics on Twitter when you first get on, and one of those it could be beauty, it could be tech, it could be marketing, whatever it is, you can follow those topics and it'll show you those topics based on whatever you click when you get onto Twitter. Like, the algorithm's going to remember, oh, they want to learn more about beauty. Here's beauty content, whatever it is. There's getting on LinkedIn and just like liking and sharing people's stories that you find interesting and engaging with them through the comments, just being like, hey, great job on your blog, whatever it is. But people start to remember you like that, and they're more likely to answer your DMs if you do reach out to them. Then there's going on Eventbrite and checking out what's going on in your area. Like, what's something that you like to do? Maybe there's something common on there that you can go ahead and join. Meetups, events, even if it's online, going to those and just networking and meeting people and engaging with them. It works.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now I feel like I need a crash course on Twitter from Paris, because like I have it, but I certainly don't know how to use it or leverage it for my
Oriana, I
benefit.
agree, because I'm like,
and like
I do not spend time on Twitter anymore. I spend a ton of time on LinkedIn.
And I'm like, I feel like I'm missing out now for what Paris just said. I was like, what am I missing out on?
Yeah,
And like we did Y Combinator last summer, and like everybody from YC is on Twitter, and I was like, I don't know how to do this. So I'm gonna talk to Paris after to figure out Twitter. We do LinkedIn, but like I agree, like just social engagement as well. Like there are people that I'm social friends with from LinkedIn. Like we've just followed each other, and then we've like commented on each other's posts, and it's been years and we've never met and never conducted business with each other. But like sometimes they'll think of me for something, or I'll think of them for something, and it's really powerful. And then I think honestly the biggest element is like, if you don't have a network, don't let that hold you back, but start building a network ASAP. And that's if you're a college student with your professors. Like I went to BU. I wish BU had startup the innovation center that exists today when I was a student. Like there was nothing like that, and now I'm constantly like impressed by all the schools, innovation centers, entrepreneurship centers. People can major in entrepreneurship, and so the resources from an academic level are really increasing. So start there. But as Paris and Keith have said, like really go to events, whether they're virtual, whether they're in person. Introduce yourself, follow people on social media, engage with them, and that's how you start to build a network. And a lot of the time, you don't have to have an ask. You don't need to ask for money. You don't need to ask for anything. You just get to know each other, because then when the time comes that you do have an ask, people are a lot more not just willing to, but open to, because they know you a little bit. It's not a random request that's out of the blue. Sometimes I'll get a random LinkedIn message will be like, "Hey, I know you went to YC. Can you review my application and apply?" And I'm like, I don't know you. I don't know you. Versus somebody's like, "Hey, I'm really interested in the work that AOA is doing. I have a thought about applying to YSC one day. I'd love to know about your experience." I'm gonna get on the phone with that person, and then I'll offer to recommend them, because this is just like, show interest in the person you're getting to know without going straight into an ask. I think can also be really valuable.
Honestly, those are all solid advices. Thank you everyone for pitching into that a little bit. I love hearing. I was very, very curious. I'm also going to do a quick slide plug saying network was great for me. I mean, I was in Boston my first 4 weeks. Had very little connections. I started at MassChallenge, didn't really know the tech space very well. I literally met Stephanie Rolick, who runs the Startup Boston Week, because she set up on a booth right next to me. I had volunteered to set up a booth for MassChallenge on a Saturday. I have no idea why, but I volunteered anyways. But that small little connection, I had no idea who Stephanie was, no idea what this relationship would lead to. But over the years, it's been very beneficial to have somebody who's so into the space. But those are just the lucky little networking things that just happens, right? You just talk to people, you engage, and you just never know when they'll come kind of help you and you can help them. But on that topic, this is very, like, networking is one thing. Making introductions, talking to somebody, that's like the first date. I think I'm very, very curious. Keith, if you don't mind taking this, because you've been around in this space the longest, as far as I know, of all four of us in this room right now. What do you think is like the secret in starting, and not just starting, but I guess essentially maintaining good relationships within this ecosystem, within the startup sphere? Because networking, I think, is like, when I think about it, is like the initial steps, right? But part of it is, and then the second half is often maintaining these relationships and keeping them going. Like, there's a lot of people in this ecosystem. You're constantly talking to like VCs, investors, partners. You're talking to your team, your software engineers, and there's a lot of moving pieces. Like, how do you maintain like good relationships within this space when your time is so limited, your resources so limited? Keith,
I guess you got to kind of prioritize that, as your network is, it's gold, right? It's the relationships that drive businesses forward, especially if you're starting something that's similar and that's in the same industry. So for me, I was doing recruiting for tech companies, and then I started VentureFizz that is still in the same world. So all the relationships that I had built through the years transferred over. So you got to keep those relationships ongoing and just continue to over deliver, right? So you got to, especially so the business model for VentureFizz is the companies obviously are buying a subscription. So they are the customers that pay the bills, but then there's the job seekers that are ultimately hopefully finding a great job opportunity through VentureFizz. So it's a double-sided marketplace. But with the customer side, that on the companies, it's just those relationships. If you're treating them well through the years, they will always be grateful and will continue to be a customer. I've had customers on VentureFizz through the full life cycle that were probably customers that were using me as a recruiter. So you got to keep networking and keeping those relationships intact, as it's so important. And I'm sure Oriana, like the investors, like when you're going out to raise capital, that you already have those relationships intact, that you don't just forget who helped you, even though they passed on your company. It's just keeping an ongoing relationship with as many people as you can. And even if you don't talk to someone for 10 years, I had someone reach out to me yesterday that I know really well. I probably haven't talked to him in 3-4 years, but it's like, hey, how you doing? Great to hear from you. Glad to hear that things are going well. So yeah, it's super important.
I think you have to be purposeful, like with your relationships, and not just opportunistic about them. Like, there are investors that I first started speaking to in the very early days that I knew would never be a seed investor, and I knew they would never invest in my round, but in the hopes that one day that they would come in because they were bigger funds. Like, I'm purposeful about engaging with them, about updating them, about understanding what they value as well, and like what's important to them. With some of my earliest angels investors that wrote the smallest of checks, I would treat them the exact same way that I would treat some of my biggest investors that wrote much larger checks, because at the end of the day, they invested in AOA because they had the belief in our team and in our mission, and in the same way that any other investor would. And so it's, maintaining relationships is just as important as creating them from the beginning, if not more important, because it's the long lasting relationships that are gonna be the ones that are by your side whenever you need the help, whether it's a challenging situation, whether it's a favor. Having maintained those relationships, those are the people that are really going to be helpful for a long time and in the long run of your startup.
That makes a lot of sense. I did have a question in the chat. This sounds, I guess, for all, I was thinking about the format in which you interact with these people. The question that came in the chat was, how do you keep them going? LinkedIn, phone, lunch? Is there a favorite mechanism that you guys use? Is it just a case by case basis?
All of the above. So I would say it depends on the formality, right? Like our current investors, investors that are actually invested in the AOA, they get a quarterly newsletter that's updating them. And then following that, some of them will ask for a phone call, and I will always take their call, right? I'm never too busy to speak with any of my investors. Some of them some of them will be like, hey, I want to catch up with you. And I'm like, okay, I updated everything in the newsletter, but sure. And you know what? When we get on the phone, they don't really want to catch up about what's on the newsletter. They want to catch up on how I'm doing, which is lovely. And so there's always remember that there's a people element to it. So that's more on the formal side. On the informal side, I think it's like Paris said, engaging in people's posts, just chatting and writing a comment when somebody's speaking at a panel, just maybe attending that panel and saying, I love, what you were saying about this or that. And then because of the nature of my work, I'm traveling quite a bit, and I have most of my contacts are Boston, New York, and San Francisco. Whenever I'm in one of the cities, I'll hit them up and I'll be like, hey, I'm in SF for a couple of days, would love to take you to coffee. Don't necessarily have an agenda. Yes, one day I want investment from them, but I'm just going to take them out to coffee. I'm going to take them out to lunch. Or some of my current investors where I don't have an active need for them in that time. When I'm in Boston, I'll text them and I'll say, hey, I'm in Boston for a couple of days. I'm in between meetings here and here, and I'm going to be by this neighborhood. Want to have coffee with me? So I think it's a mix of everything. It shouldn't be something that's weighing on you, oh, it's this cumbersome thing that I have to maintain these relationships. It's honestly, in the long run, it's kind of think of them like work friends. You're not texting your friends all the time, but if you want to go out to drinks on a Friday night, you'll text some of your friends, you'll see who's around. Maybe you'll shoot a text with a funny article or a meme that you've seen or a reel that you've seen. It's kind of the same but on a professional side. You engage on something that you have a mutual connection to. You meet up when there's an opportunity, and you're trying to build genuine connections.
That's pretty good. That's really, really solid. I love the idea of the genuine connections, but I'm a big believer that genuinity comes from often personal conviction. It can only be really genuine if you actually believe in the stuff that you do and you believe in your own self, right? You guys, I'm speaking to a group of I guess founders who've done this for a lot longer, who have gone through the trials and tribulations. But I'm gonna ask a little bit to turn back the wheels in time a little bit and think about more of when you're first networking, right? You're still figuring out your product. You're still figuring out what you have got going on. I think that when you're engaging with a lot of people, when you're constantly talking about your product, your solution, it often is tested, right? And then in these situations, the people are always, sometimes it'll be following up with a question or two about saying, hey, so what about this? And one thing that comes off is what is, how strongly do you believe in your company or personal mission? But my question, I guess, with Paris, I'm sorry, Harris, I'm redirecting towards you, is how do you validate the strength of your mission before you even have a customer or a reliable champion in a partnership of sort? How do you know, you can look at the data, you could say, I recognize that this field definitely needs more diversity. You can do this for VentureFizz, could say okay, we definitely need a job board up on this. There's a lot of things that you can recognize as a need, and there's often this, when you're first starting out, there's a lot of research to do. But Paris, when you were first starting out, how did you feel you went before you got your first customer, before you had a first champion of any sort? How did you figure out, okay, this is worth pursuing? In the sense, how do you know this mission is strong, is key, at least to you?
I feel so for me, I kind of feel it did fall into my lap a little bit, just because employers are reaching out to me. I never had the intention of starting a company. I just so happened to have a tweet that went viral that brought awareness to a community that needed more opportunity and more representation in the industry, and employers saw that and were asking me to do the work for them. And so that's when I realized, I was like, okay, like I still didn't think it would be a company. It's just like the opportunity was there. And I started the company just because I saw that just recruiting wasn't going to be enough. And I felt that employers will find it valuable if I stay on the job with hires, to make sure that they're being set up for success and relaying that feedback to the employer. Like, what employer wouldn't want that? And so when I launched it, that's why when I launched it in June, I was like, hey, I'm launching Black Tech Pipeline. It's going to be a job and recruiting platform. Seeing that my calendar got booked out immediately for months, I was like, okay, like this is in demand. This is a need. And that's just kind of how it happened, I guess.
That makes sense. Oh yeah, I want to follow up with Oriana on this as well. What type of industry research did you do before launching a company in this end?
So this was even generally YC talks a lot about product market fit, right? Like, how do you know that there's a market for it? But we had started AOA before that, and in retrospect, that's what we were looking for. We just didn't know that it was called product market fit. And it was like, for us, it started with like a broader mission. Our why was really having an impact in women's health, sort of like Paris. It's like this systemic issue that happens in our society, DEI, women's health, whatever, equity for funding. And that was kind of like the broader idea. And that was kind of what was sitting at the back of our mind. That was like, there's such a lack of innovation in tools for issues that disproportionately affect women's health. And so I want to be involved in this space. I want to have an impact in this space. But from there to actually creating a product or a solution to solve a problem, a lot went into that. When we were looking at innovation, and this is, I think, quite particular for the life sciences world, is that the reality is that there's a lot of really exciting science. Not all of it are good products. Not all of it actually have a value in the healthcare system. And so what we really needed to figure out was, okay, is this science that we are diligencing actually a product that payers, providers, and patients are going to benefit? And that is our triangle. Unfortunately, again, the way the healthcare system works, I cannot create, as a company we are going to be successful, it cannot be a tool that only benefits one of that triangle. It has to work for patients, providers, and payers. And so that's our product market fit. Is this something that's going to be a tool that is going to serve the ecosystem, this triangle of an ecosystem? And can I develop a product? And whenever it gets grueling, and it gets grueling a lot in a startup, right? Like, you're raising money, you're getting a lot of no's, shit happens in product development. It's taking forever to find the right person that you want to hire, like all the stuff you're constantly going through. For us, we go back to our why. Simon Sinek, if anybody follows him, if you don't, you should. His YouTube videos, his book, it's like, it starts with why. It starts with why. Like, go back to that why. And for us, it's like having an impact in women's health. And I could tell you, like, it was like we had a ship and there were so many holes, and we were all sitting there with buckets trying to get the water out and like just trying to stay afloat. It was one of those weeks. And Monday morning, we have a Monday morning team meeting, and it was just like the boat was flooding. And we were like, oh shit. And Tuesday, I get an email from somebody who had seen our funding announcement. And she had said, I was 25 years old when I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And the only reason that I was diagnosed is because I marched myself into a urgent care and I demanded an ultrasound because nobody would take me seriously. Nobody would, etc. And eventually I was diagnosed and I had the surgery, and this is where I am today. And I loved the mission that you're on to find something for early detection. And I just wanted to like applaud the mission and etc. And I took that message and I was like, shit, this is why we're going to be here with our buckets. And this is why we're going to do what we do. And so I asked her if she would be willing to share her story with me. And I was like, do you mind writing this up? And I was like, I won't publish it. If you're open, I just want to share it with my team. And she was like, I don't mind if you do want to publish it. So we're going to be doing like a social media spotlight with her, etc. But then I took that Google Doc and I wrote an email to my team on the Wednesday morning. So remember, the boat's sinking on Monday. I get this email Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, and I emailed my whole team, and basically I said, this is why we do what we do. This is why I'm constantly on top of you for deadlines. This is why we're not going to take our sweet ass time to develop a product, because like we could go out this slowly and have something in the market in 10 years. But this is why we're going to be the first and why we're going to get to market sooner. This is why we do the hard work, why we get up in the morning when yesterday was so hard and we know that today is going to be so much harder, because it's these women that need what we're providing. They absolutely need it. And I kid you not, on Friday, that boat was entirely patched up and we were cruising. It was like we were on top of the world again. And so, you know, know what your why is, that like big mission idea, and then translate that into something tangible that is going to have product market fit. But don't get lost in that. Don't get lost in the coding, in the development, in just like in the iterations, etc. Constantly remind yourself what that why is. Constantly remind your team what that why is. And I think that's what makes you kind of succeed in the ebbs and flows that exist of a startup.
Wow, that was really inspiring to hear. I love that. Wow, sorry, I was processing that for a little bit. That was actually really, really inspiring. I love that it's only like 8:46 in the morning, and I'm like a little pumped up. But before I need to kilter myself a little bit before the day starts. I would say on the topic of staying focused on the mission as well as keeping calm. I guess like, do you guys have any? I mean, Oriana, I think I'm gonna go to you because you just gave the fiery ass talk. It was how do you stay calm like with all these things going on? Like, what has been your tip when you recognize there's so many things you got to balance? Life feels like it's flooding, the boat is sinking. Like, what has been your tip or something, a go-to strategy of yours to make sure like the world's not on fire, this is fine, I got this? Like, has there been any like tips or suggestions you have? And this is very open to everyone, but I want to start with Oriana because she just gave the fiery speech.
I think take care of your mental health. Really take care of your mental health, whether that's, you know, working with an online platform for therapy, whether that's with a therapist, whether that's going outside, whatever it is that you feel like it takes care of your own mental health. Make sure that you're constantly taking care of it and not only looking after it when in times of need, because it's like it's a physical and mental thing. Like, you know, when you get sick, if your body is generally well nourished and generally well hydrated, then the ability to fight off that illness is quite high. The same comes with storms and ability to stay calm. If you've taken care of your mental health throughout your lifetime, then when something hits you really hard, then you just have a stronger ability to take care of it. And then the second is just really lean on people. The entrepreneurial journey can sometimes be lonely. You often can feel like just nobody gets it. Nobody's going to work as hard as you. Nobody's going to care as much as you, etc. And that may be true for your mission, but that's not necessarily true about you. There are people that deeply care about you and your well-being and your success. And remembering that and leaning on them, whether it's your co-founders, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's, you know, that parent group or that dog group, just lean on people when you feel like you're really struggling. Again, just helps you feel balanced and calm that you can tackle this. And then the last thing is that know that it's like the storm will ease. It always does. It is never permanent. Something gives. At some point, something gives. Do not give up. Do not do not feel like this is the end all be all. Know that at some point something will give, and that sometimes it's just a moment of difficulty, a moment of hardship, but do your best to go back to that why and just take it one step at a time, one task at a time, one fire at a time, and kind of that feeling of knowing that at some point something's going to give, and it usually does.
Okay. Love the answer. Keith, do you have anything you think I can add on top of that, or Paris?
Yeah, there's definitely peaks and valleys, like every journey. Like for me, you know, I started VentureFizz in a valley of no one's hiring, so that ended up being probably the worst time to start a company. But that's often the best time to start a company in times of turmoil because no one else is going to do it. And I've already been through. Well, the pandemic hit VentureFizz hard because everyone didn't know what to do and they were stopping hiring immediately. And our job board was probably a quarter of what it normally was. And then it rebounded very quickly. And now with all the looming talks of recessions and, the tech industry has been getting hit pretty hard because of all the different layoffs, or the venture capital funding has been a little bit less. And so, things like that, you just got to keep remembering your why I started VentureFizz because job seekers needed a place to discover companies and to find out about them. It was just, the same thing with Paris, or what she discovered just being in her job. There was a lack of diversity in the tech industry. So for me, it was like I would talk to job seekers and they didn't know events. They didn't know jobs that were out there. They didn't know companies that got funded. And I'm like, I think this information is valuable. And that was my MVP. And, 13 years later, there's a self-sustaining business. So
I give it last minute. Great. Thank you so much for that. I love hearing how you guys decompress a little bit more and stay more filtered, because I think that's something that I'm always constantly wrestling with, even within my own job, and I'm not even a startup founder. So I do have a couple questions in the chat that I do want to have the opportunity to talk out loud before the session's over. I noticed one thing in the Q&A. I'm just going to share it out again. I might have asked someone a little early. Dan Newman was asking, how do you weigh the pro versus cons of going standard service, custom professional service, or consulting? Does anyone feel comfortable feeling this?
I can answer that. So, I mean, in theory, I was doing services for search work while building VentureFizz, which is a product that has a subscription. So yes, if you can juggle the two and do something that's going to bring in money to support the longer term vision, then absolutely. You just don't want to get caught into that as your only option for revenue. Or, I just found people get too caught into the custom professional services where they lose sight of their vision, because customers will ask a lot of different questions of, can you build this? Can you build this? And you say, yes, yes. So saying no can be difficult if you're doing that type of business model, because it's going to bring in revenue today versus the longer term vision of maybe longer, recurring revenue or whatever in the future. So it is a way to support and fund. VentureFizz is I'm very envious of others that raise venture capital. Competitors of mine have raised tens of millions of venture capital funding dollars. And I'm just like, man, that would be so cool. Yet I'm bootstrapped. It's a different approach. I, like being bootstrapped because I don't have to do the investor email that Oriana needs to. Now, obviously her product needs venture capital investing. It's a very different world. But I don't have a board that I need to address. So I kind of control my own mission. But the professional services is a great way to fund the business instead of trying to raise capital.
Great. I think you're talking, got someone else in the question chat asking a little bit. Could you talk a little bit more about how you validated the need for the VentureFizz offering? How did you lean on your network towards it? Is a question that Joel John has asked.
So it was more of like me just talking to job seekers and realizing it, because I would ask, like, tell me about your background. What do you want to do? Okay, here's an opportunity. So it's just the standard recruiting process. But then I would be like sharing marketplace information to build credibility as me as a dialed in recruiter, not just a staffing person that just is trying to make money. So I would add value at the end of the call with information about the market. So events, you should go to companies that recently got funded. So these were things that people are always like, oh my God, I wish I knew this. This is amazing. How do you track all this information? I'd give them different publications. So as that just continued to happen over and over and over again, I'm like, I think people need something here. And then my side project of that blogger thing that I was doing, when I was getting hundreds of people signing up for that, I was just like, I need to build this community, because there was nothing that was bringing the Boston tech scene together. So it was just me recognizing a need, but also validating it by talking to people all the time. And I think everyone here can answer that. Like, talk to your customers, the people that actually need you. So job seekers is something that I try to talk to all the time. I know what my customers need in terms of the companies, because we're talking to them continuously. But the job seekers, they kind of come to our site, they do something, and maybe they leave and never come back, or they come and they stick around. Those are the people I want to be talking to, because I understand, why do you never come back? Or if you're sticking around, why are you sticking around? So how can we make our product better?
Great. Thank you so much for fielding that question. I'm not sure. We have a couple more questions. I'm trying to figure out if we can fit all these in. Okay. We have a question for Ramon. This is a bit lengthy. I know each of you had your different journeys, so I'm going to post it out here. The question goes, how did you get from I want to start a company from towards a specific idea that you work out? Did you have multiple ideas and selected one of them? It's a little bit about bio. I have multiple ideas, but I am wondering if I should work out several ideas or work on one of them. Also, I would like to know how this process was for you. This seems like a pretty open-ended question, and I know each of you had different journeys. Oriana or
I
Keith?
think I can, yeah, think I can talk about that. So for us, because we, Paris's story is that there was really a specific need that she addressed that came to her. For us, it was like a broader mission, and so it was like we want to do something in women's health, and we really didn't have a specific product. We diligence, and I'll talk about what that means, multiple products at the same time before we selected one. And that's also sort of an element of risk management to really understand which idea is going to, you have to vet a lot of ideas and work on one product. That's how I would say it. And so you can't work on multiple products. You really need to be focused. You really need to give things dedication. You can't have your foot in too many buckets, but you need to vet a lot of ideas, and you really need to spend time vetting before you start developing and working. And vetting is there a market for this? Is there a need for this? Are you solving a problem, or is this a nice to have? Is this a tool that you find cool that nobody else does? You need to talk to people that would use whatever product you're trying to create, whatever idea that you have, and understand, do other people find value in this? Is this something that could be monetized? Could this be profitable, or could this have return on investment one day? You need to vet all of that on all of the ideas that you think of, and then the one that has the highest potential, that's the one that you actively work on.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I'm going to piggyback on that. So, because I can speak to my experience, but so VentureFizz, we have a podcast where I interview founders. We have 260 episodes, and the common theme for all those founders that I interview is they spend a ton of time doing upfront due diligence on the market, talking to potential customers before they even wrote a line of code or started product development to validate that their idea, that once they do build it, people will actually buy it. So listen to those past episodes, because it's just inspirational stories to help you figure that out. Because if you're just doing AI for good, but don't have an actual market that people will spend money on, then you're just going to waste your time and build something that you won't be able to actually monetize.
Whew, love it. Paris, now actually got one last question from the audience from you. Susan Munter would love to know, Paris, what do you find the most valuable to keep your company going? Like Susan Munter is saying, I would like to hear Paris talk about what she finds most valuable to keep her company going. I think this might be, yeah.
Just the need is really important, just because of there's such a lack of representation of Black technologists within the tech industry itself, and the talent is definitely out there. And I'm part of that community. So I'm just really dedicated to this work. I even grew up in it. My mom does this very same work ever since I was little. And so it's just something that keeps me going. It's just important. It's a need.
Perfect. Sarah, I hope you love the answer. Okay, we've got one. Well, I don't think we have time for any more questions.
We're coming up on time. You can do one more. We can go a couple minutes over, but then we do have to wrap it up. I'm sorry. It's such a good conversation. I'm so sorry.
I have a feeling that this question might have been already answered, but we'll find out. How much time does this founder spend researching the market before launching? This is a very.
I've been doing this for over, like all the time, even when you're still running your company, all the time, because you want to stay updated. Yeah, the market's always changing. What's new? What else can you implement? All the time. It doesn't ever stop.
Never stops. How much before actually launching? And launching is different. For us, launching was going out to seek funding. For Paris and Keith, maybe it was like actually going out to get customers. But like a significant amount of time, and I can't say days or weeks because it depends. Like, are you doing this full time? Are you doing this part time? Are you doing this? But like, so that you've spoken to, like, I want to say close to 100 people, if not more. And the majority have all said the same thing. Because if you've spoken to that many people and everybody has said something different, then you're not on the right track and you're not ready to launch, right? It's not just about like how much time you spend, is that like it needs to lead to conclusive like good conclusions. So where you've spoken to over 100 people and the majority, not everybody's going to agree, but the majority are on the same page. And then once you launch, you're constantly researching the market, you're constantly validating, you're making sure that nothing has dramatically changed that you don't need to dramatically change as well. So it's constant.
Woo, perfect. Great. That concludes the Q&A portion.